welcome back to another new episode of the Synapse Podcast. And in this specific podcast, I'm trying out a whole new thing in front of you guys, that is the solo podcasting. And in this specific episode, I'm gonna talk to you about my research about tuberculosis disease. And the reason why I did that research was very interesting because, as you guys know, we have treatment for tuberculosis, we have vaccine for tuberculosis also, and even after having a vaccine, even after having a treatment for this disease, even after that we aren't able to eradicate or even we aren't able to eliminate it from our population. Now the question arises, why can't we really eradicate or eliminate it from our Indian population? Why can't the whole world eradicate this disease even after having a treatment, even after having a vaccine, which is BCG vaccine, as you guys know? So even after having that, why can't we really eradicate this whole disease? Now that specific point really made me curious about this whole disease, and this is the whole episode in which I have documented my whole research about this disease. What are the barriers in achieving the eradication of this disease, and also about the healthcare program that is running in our country, which you guys know about DOTS program. So we are going to talk about all these things. And I hope you enjoy this whole episode. I hope you enjoy this whole solo podcasting thing. And yeah, let's just begin with the episode.
I've got that old TB, I can't eat a bite.
TB was certainly epidemic in the first half of the 20th century in the United States.
It can attack almost any part of the body, but commonly settles in the chest, where
Emergency.
TB is rampant in many other places in the world, and
Sanatorium, the Oregon State Tuberculosis Hospital in Salem.
I love your dinner. Love it.
And the proof that it was an infectious disease soon led to massive medical TV campaigns and advertisements. The way to routine use the way BCG use the BCG use the BCCG vaccine.
Tuberculosis has been in the world since ages, I should say. The tubercle decay that happens in our body, it has been found in Egyptian mummies. Now you guys understand, Egyptian mummies are like 1,000 years old. So you can like how many years since it has been. And the other fact is that before 1943, when like antibiotics were invented, all people knew about this disease. And the only treatment that they had at that point of time was to like be dependent on their own body's immunity. So what they did was, like what Europeans did was, they built out big sanatoriums. They also did build some in India also, and those all sanatoriums, they were filled with TB infected patients. So that was the whole way of treatment earlier, before 1943, when antibiotics got treatment. And in 1943 was that date, like 1943 was that specific year when antibiotics came into picture, and that was the time when we had the first treatment of tuberculosis. And fast forward to the 21, we are here. We are about to end the whole second wave of this coronavirus pandemic, and the progression that we did from 1943 till 2019, that was a whole new humongous progression that we did. But because of this whole pandemic, the whole progression that we did has resumed, I should say. So that's what we are going to talk about. But before moving further, I want to talk to you about the basic symptoms that a TB patient has and what are the different types of TB patients. Talking specifically about the symptoms that a TB patient shows, I know you might have heard about this. I know you might have heard this Indian ads that keep on running each day. Those ads, like those are the awareness campaigns that Indian government keeps on doing about the tuberculosis. That
इसकी यही प्रॉब्लम है।
कब से?
जब से क्रिकेट खेल रहा है तभी से।
अरे भाई साहब, क्रिकेट की नहीं हो, आपकी खांसी की बात कर रहे हैं, बुड़बक।
खांसी?
हाँ।
इसको तो एक आध महीना हो गया।
खुद की खांसी को एक आध महीने।
That is why the Indian government has been really working hard in awareing its own citizens about the tuberculosis. So basically symptoms are very simple. Active TB patient has chronic cough more than 2 weeks, and he has fevers and he has night sweatings, and these are the basic symptoms of a TB patient. Now here one thing you need to understand, what is the difference between an active TB patient and a latent TB patient. So the only difference, like I should say the two differences between an active and a latent TB patient is that latent TB patient doesn't show any symptoms of tuberculosis, and also latent TB patient don't usually spread the disease, and latent TB patients keep on showing no symptoms till its whole lifetime, and only 10% of the latent TB patient gets converted into an active form. So that is what you really need to understand between active and a latent TB patient. Now that you have understood about the briefs about what tuberculosis is, let me just tell you about the healthcare programs that are running by different countries for eradication of the disease. So basically all the healthcare programs that are run by each and every country is mostly based on World Health Organization guidelines that are put on by, and they keep on updating those guidelines years and years as soon as a new researchers comes by about the tuberculosis. So basically similar to that, a healthcare program that is run in India for eradication of the disease is, I know you might have heard this specific term about you might have heard this specific term anywhere around public healthcare centers or in your TV also. DOTS program for tuberculosis. So basically what DOTS is DOTS is a short form of directly observed treatment. So DOTS is just basically a way of how you treat an active TB patient, and this is like DOTS is just a program based on World Health Organization guidelines on treating an active TB patient. But before even moving on to that, let me just tell you about the treatments that we have about the tuberculosis. Right now we have around 14 drugs approved for tuberculosis, and out of that there are some drugs which is in the first line drugs, and most of the drugs which are newly developed are in the second and third line drugs. Now the thing which you really need to understand here is the difference between a first and second line drug or even third line drug also. So first line drugs are the most effective drugs on that specific disease, and also that are the drugs which has the least or no side effects on the patient. As you compare it with the second and third line drugs are usually toxic. I shouldn't say toxic, but yeah, they do have a lot of worse side effects on the other, on our body. But yeah, they do treat the whole tuberculosis. So that is the basic difference of our first and second line drugs, and it depends upon the patient on what drug it is susceptible to. This drug susceptibility and this drug mutation I am going to talk further in this episode. But you have understood the brief about the whole tuberculosis disease. You have understood about the healthcare programs that are running to eradicate this disease. Now is the time when we really connect the dots and try to understand the problems that are coming in front of us in the eradication of this whole disease. So the problem is very much simple. As per the old researches that has been gone in tuberculosis, alternate therapy was found to be very much successful on tuberculosis patient. What's alternate therapy? Alternate therapy is just like that. You have to take on first line drugs. You have to take on drugs in alternate days for 6 months. And if you don't get treated after 6 months, you have to continue that whole drug line for the next 1 year. So that is how in the alternate days you have to keep on taking drugs. So that is the alternate therapy. But now this whole alternate therapy was followed till 1 to 2 decades, 1 decade I should say. So for 10 years we were following only alternate therapy, and that were the whole World Health Organization guidelines, and that has really resulted into microorganisms developing mutations and resistance against the antibiotics that we are using. So now that you have really understood what's the real problem, the whole throughout this whole time, since I should say when the TB program was started in our country, it was around 1993. from 1993 till 2005, when the whole TV program was again revised, the whole microorganisms have become resistant towards the whole antibiotics. So the reason why I am telling you this is because we have now much more bigger problems than compared to the normal TB that we had. Now that we have developed around 2 to 3 types of tuberculosis disease, further classifications that we have developed is of the drug resistant tuberculosis that we have developed. Now drug resistant now there are many drug resistant types in which 2 or 3 drugs are resistant, like in which microorganisms are resistant towards 2 or 3 drugs, and they are some antibiotics work on those diseases. 3 types basically: MDR TB, XDR TB, and there's another type which is TDR TB. What is the full form of MDR TB? Which is multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. XDR, extreme drug resistant tuberculosis, and the TDR is totally drug resistant tuberculosis. The thing which you really need to understand is that for MDR TB and XDR TB, there are some drugs that the microorganisms are resistant towards, and there are some other second and third line drugs that microorganisms get killed by. So what we have to do is we don't have to give on those susceptible drugs. What we have to do is to give on second and third line drugs, and that they have. Now the patients do have worst kind of side effects that drug shows, but yeah, that is the only way how we can treat that MDR TB patient or XDR TB patient. Now there is another type of tuberculosis that has been developed throughout this time, which is the TDR TB, which is the totally drug resistant TB, in which all our 14 antibiotics don't work on that microorganisms, and that microorganism of TDR TB is completely resistant towards all the 14 antibiotics that we have against TB. That is where the real problem is. That is where the real reason why I'm making this episode, because that has made me really stunned about the fact that if this TDR TB gets outbreaks in the whole Indian population, let me just tell you about this fact that TDR TB in Indian population, we already had around 11 cases of TDR TB. Now that you can really understand 11 cases of TDR TB, and they are let me also tell you that they are not only from one state of a country, one state of India. The very first case of TDR TB was from Uttar Pradesh, and the second case which was found of TDR TB was from South India. So now that you can really understood with the distances that TDR TB is, and it has already creeped into our Indian population that we don't realize, but it has already creeped in. That's why the government in the recent years have been really working hard towards eradicating this disease. So now that you have really understood about the disease, now that you have really understood about the MDR, XDR and TDR TB, and the real problem is this drug resistance that have developed around this years, and the reason behind developing of this drug resistant tuberculosis is not only those alternate therapy that we did. It is also because of the patients. It is also because of patients' irregular treatment that patients take. Let's suppose if an active TB patient starts his treatment for 6 months of term, he starts his treatment at the very first month. He shows some improvements. In the second month, he shows absolute improvement. He don't have now the symptoms of a tuberculosis, and he stops taking his medicine. The other fact is that specific microorganism is still in his lungs. It has not been dead yet. And if you stop that antibiotic treatment, that whole tuberculosis microorganism grows again, and now this time when he grows again, he might develop. There are high chances that microorganism would develop a certain kind of resistance to antibiotics. So that's the real problem. If a treatment has been given to an active TB patient for 6 months, he has to take it regularly each day, and that's what the whole program is all about. DOTS program, directly observed treatment. That is what the whole thing is. the public healthcare workers of India right now who are working for DOTS program, what they do is they go like daily, they go to different activity, like they go to different TB patients, give them medicine, get their whole fingerprint done so that it gets recorded in the whole database that this patient has taken today's medicine. So that kind of stuff goes happen because government really is working a lot in maintaining this daily treatment of active TB patients that India has. So now that I have told you about all the things about the tuberculosis, I really wanted to end this whole episode with just one fact, which is the only treatment that has been found effective in the long term for tuberculosis. Although throughout this whole time, since when we have discovered the whole antibiotics, the amount of tuberculosis cases that comes into a population has been reduced drastically, but still those infections come upon. Here's what tuberculosis was a big problem way back in 1890 in Europe. So what Europeans did was, there was an industrial revolution that happened in 1900s in Europe, as you guys know, and after industrial revolution, the whole Europe changed. People's living lifestyle got changed, people's sanitations also got changed, people's living conditions changed as a whole. That really created a drastically decrease in the amount of tuberculosis cases that come up in Europe. So that was the point when the whole world realized how much an importance does a basic sanitation, a basic living conditions matter for a population. And for India to eradicate this kind of a disease, there is one thing which we need to make sure of is we have to keep on increasing the whole lifestyle of Indian population, and it shouldn't be just limited to the 1 or 2% of the population. It should be the basic sanitation should be accessible to all the population of India. The basic things that we can take is maintaining a good sanitation. The basic things that we can take is to provide a whole diet to each and every person in the Indian population. So that's what we can do, and just doing that, just by maintaining proper sanitation, just by maintaining a proper diet to each and every person in a country, we can eradicate this disease. And that's what has been really predicted by the researchers for tuberculosis. If you really want to eradicate this specific disease, there's nothing gonna work. Treatments are gonna work to a level, but after that it's up to you how you maintain the living conditions of a person. That is how it depends upon you, how you maintain the living conditions of a population. And if you really change the whole living condition of a population, if you really can do that, the disease will automatically get eliminated or eradicated from the population. So I hope that was the end of this episode about the tuberculosis, and I hope you got really interesting things to know about the tuberculosis. So tell me in the comment box what you think about this disease, and if you're listening this in any audio platforms, I would recommend you to watch the video version of this whole podcast, because in the video version of podcast it is much more interesting, it is much more visually appealing. So yeah, let's just end this episode, and thank you very much if you are listening to this episode till this point. I will be back with another new episode of the Synapse Podcast, and till then, let me just end this video, and I will be back with another new episode of the Synapse Podcast. Till then, goodbye, and see you in the next video. Bye bye.